everyone. Today's video is going to be different. But before I get into it, I need to give you a little bit of background. So, Rick Beato is one of the very few, and I mean very few, YouTubers that I keep an eye on. My time is very limited, so I don't spend a lot of time exploring YouTube and other YouTubers. I wish I could, because I would love to support the ones out there. And so Rick Beato is one of the few that I take time and I put effort towards paying attention to what he's doing, because I feel like he produces real material of value when it comes to musical, educational content on YouTube. Now, usually it's Vlad saying, hey, check this one out, or sometimes maybe a message from Lee or someone else saying, hey, Amy, Rick just put this up and you should watch it. And of course, if I have doubts about whether it's safe for me to watch, meaning I don't want to accidentally expose myself to a song that I would like to feature as a first listen on this channel in the future. If I have any doubts, I have Vlad check it out, give it a quick preview for me. But this particular video caught my eye because it's a song that I know very well by now. And of course, I knew it was safe. That is, She's Leaving Home. Rick just recently released this video as part of his What Makes This Song Great series. And I was really curious about his take on it. So I sat down to check it out, and I found myself watching the whole video. By the end, I was talking out loud as if he were in the room and we were having a discussion together. And then I got the idea of sharing my thoughts with you all here, and hopefully even Rick. I'd be absolutely delighted to hear a response from him as a musician, as a producer, and kind of develop this conversation. Now, in case there's any doubt, no, this is not an attack on Rick Beato at all. Just a friendly engagement with what he presented and some counter thoughts. And I want you to understand, I very much appreciate, I want to emphasize this, I appreciate what Rick is doing. I appreciate the knowledge he brings. I appreciate the expertise he brings. I appreciate his approach and the way he works to make this kind of content available to the whole world. Now, you have to understand that this type of dialogue that I'm doing here about this song is something that's not only very common among musicians, it's incredibly common, and it's something that we cherish. We relish this kind of interchange and exchange. It's one of the things that makes it so exciting and invigorating when we get together at, say, a convention or a performance practice, or any kind of event where musicians find themselves rubbing shoulders. The ideas start flowing and perspectives interact, whether it's sitting down together for coffee or tea, or whether it's spending a whole week together in an intensive music-focused event. All of this is the sort of stuff that we live for it. We thrive on it. So I feel like this is fun for me, but it's also kind of fun for you to get a glimpse into the kinds of conversations that we might have in those kinds of contexts and interactions. Now that you have a sort of background, a large view of this conversation, let's get back to the topic. She's leaving home. Rick pointed out three things. First, he focused a lot of his time on chords and their identities. Secondly, he pointed out large melodic leaps as something distinctive or important to making the song great. And thirdly, he commented on non-chord notes found within the melody. And he focused on these three things as being important to what makes this song great, what makes it stand out, what makes it memorable, what makes it a song that we return to over and over again and still enjoy and are enriched by it. So now I want to share with you what I was talking out loud to him about while watching the video? Well, just like Rick, I also have 3 points. 1, I noticed that most of Rick's video focused on the chords, but as much as I agree, both from a teacher's perspective and a performer's perspective and arranger, composer, just general musician's perspective, the chords are important. I actually don't believe that they play a significantly outsized role in making this song great, meaning they're not irrelevant. But I believe that there are some more notable elements that make this song stand out from my perspective. One of these is actually, it happens to be the editing done after the recording. Let me explain. The opening chord, the opening seconds of the song. Do we really care or notice what chord it is when this song starts? Does it matter so much what chord it is and how it relates to the key of the piece? Or is it something else that grabs our attention and captivates us? Let's put it this way. When you listen to this piece, what is the first and biggest element that jumps out to you? The harp! And even more than that, what the harp is playing. And it's actually not what the harpist is playing, but how it sounds on the recording. Because the way the harpist actually played it is, it sounds rather like this. Let's see, we're on an E chord. See, chords are actually important, by the way. We do have to know what chord we're headed towards. But listen. It's pretty, it's nice, it's fine. But does it captivate our ears in the same way as when this song comes on to play? No. And so this particular part of the song's greatness comes down to the wonderful choice, or shall I say, luck of editing, which created this incredibly harpy, shimmering, scintillating, rippling effect of this brilliant opening that we have on the recording. That sound is unforgettable. That is outstanding. Second, another thing that Rick mentioned are the large leaps that this melody sometimes makes. And he especially focused on the minor seventh when it says, at 5 o'clock, at 5 o'clock, Wednesday morning at 5, bum, bum. You can see the distance I'm traveling here, right? That's our minor seventh. At 5 o'clock, it's true. That is a notable moment in the melody, and not a super common melodic interval. I mean, I was thinking, how many other songs, pieces of music can I recall which use that? And the only one that came to mind quickly was Somewhere. There's a place for us. But I couldn't think of any others in the moment. So it is an uncommon melodic interval. But I don't think it's so much about the fact that it leaps far here or that it's that particular interval, but more about where and when it leaps and in what context. Let's talk about context first. Notice how pretty much everything else surrounding that one leap is a scale-wise, stepwise movement. It doesn't jump around much at all. I mean, just watch it. We start here. We're just walking down like a scale. We leap up, and once we've passed that leap, walking down again. And we have this little sort of curlicue at the end, smaller leap, which does exist at the very tail. It's kind of like a flourish in somebody's final letter of their signature or something like that. But that leap stands out kind of like a red coat in a sea of gray and black. Oh, wow. Now, it's not just about the context, but it's also about where, right in the middle of this otherwise stepwise descending scale, right in the middle of it. We could make the same thing happen in any song that walks down the scale. Let's take a well-known one. Let's say Joy to the World. Okay, Joy to the World, right? If we want to turn that into the same kind of leap, well, let's go back to this Wednesday morning at 5. Since it's a scale-wise movement, we could continue to follow the scale down and not leap at all. Wednesday morning at 5. Imagine that. It worked. It's all the right notes. That's what it is. So if we take that and apply it to Joy to the World. Let's do this. Does it have the same effect? We've got the same leap. It's the same minor seventh rising. But notice that with Joy to the World, even though we inserted a minor seventh leap right in the middle of the phrase, it doesn't feel so notable. It doesn't feel so significant, compelling, powerful. That's because that seventh happens on a weak part of a weak beat, and it is a very short note. We just kind of trip over it as we move on down the scale. Whereas this seventh in She's Leaving Home happens on the strongest beat and lasts twice as long as the notes on either side of it. 5 o'clock when the day begins. That's one of the things that make it feel so like a knife stab right in the middle of an otherwise ordinary melody. Rather like the jolt that came to the parents that morning when they woke to find their rather placid life cut open. So, my point, just throwing in large leaps won't do. In fact, the reason that we don't find those minor sevenths in melodies very often is because they are difficult to place well. And it's not so much about the minor seventh, but about the context, the where, and the when. That is outstanding. My third and final point, the refrain. This is such a big part of the song. Imagine if the song were just the verses, or if it had a different refrain. If I had to name just one thing that makes this refrain so compellingly stand out from the crowd, it would have to be the way in which two different perspectives are woven throughout, one superimposed over the other, so that we hear the observational statement, she is leaving, at the same time that we hear the parents' feelings and response to the event. It's magic. Now, this is not unheard of. In fact, I can think of another great piece of music, Simon and Garfunkel's Scarborough Fair, which also takes two different poetic lines and sings them one over the other. And we get an incredible impact. However, unlike that Scarborough Fair, here, these two lines are set to melodies that hold or pause on a single note, while the other line progresses. She, holding there, we gave her most of our lives, holding there, is leaving, so that we can fully hear the lyrics to both lines as they progress. And we might think, well, if we make it simple enough for our ears to follow, that might simplify our response, but actually not. Rather than simplifying our response, it strengthens the emotional tension because now we feel that we're made to process both of these voices, both of these viewpoints at the same time, fully understanding both. Try that with Scarborough Fair, and you will see that you cannot. The two lines progress at the same time, and we're left trying to pick out what did they just sing that down there. But with the Beatles, with She's Leaving Home, she da 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 is leaving. The Beatles don't let us push one or the other voice into the background. We are forced to hear and feel and process them both at the same time. Now, here's where I come to the third point that Rick talked about, the non-harmony melody notes, which, yes, they are a significant player. And for that, yes, we do have to recognize what each chord is before we can identify the notes that aren't part of the basic chord. But even here, I prefer an example from the refrain rather than the verse. Because in the refrain, where the non-harmony notes land, they arrive with the beat, with the chord, on a strong beat. And that, the impact of that is much more notable, no pun intended, than when we simply pass through a non-harmony note on our way to another chord tone. Let me give you an example. A passing note. What is a passing note? It's when we pass by a non-harmony note as we're traveling to another harmony note. The example that Rick used was Wednesday morning at. And on morning, we have the B minor 7, and then we pass through this note on ing. Morning at. As we're traveling to this note, which also belongs to the chord. So this one belongs, this one belongs, this one doesn't belong. Morning at. So we're passing through, passing by. That is a passing tone, a non-harmony note that we pass through while still emphasizing or arriving focused on the harmony notes. But let's take the refrain here. She is leaving. This is all built on the E chord. She goes on forever, is leaving. All right. That's she. That's a E chord, E note, and on leaving, that's on a downbeat. That note doesn't belong. It doesn't belong to the chord. Leaving, and it's a strong beat. It is the downbeat. She is leaving. It's the dissonance of a non-harmony note on a strong beat. Another example happens an octave lower with the parent's perspective. We gave her most of our lives. In fact, it's the same non-harmony note. We gave her most of our lives. That emphasizes most with the dissonance. Think of it as the difference between, let's say, the passing note is you passing by the post office on your way to the bank. You drive by, you see it, it's there, you pass it, and then you arrive at the bank on time. This other example in the refrain, think of it as actually stopping at the post office. You stop there at the very time of your appointment at the bank. You were scheduled to be at a different place at that time. But instead, right? That's where the chord tells us to be. But we had something else in our schedule which interrupted our arrival, and we found ourselves at a different place. And so there's this dissonance, there's this clash, there's this tug of war. the clash, the pain of being late at one, in the wrong place at that moment in time. Well, we can't call it the wrong place in the song, but you understand the power and the significance of that. That is why I lean more towards these, we can even call them leaning notes, these notes that really lean into a dissonance on a strong beat as being something that really is contributing to the power of this piece of music, this refrain specifically. And the clash of worlds, the clash of perspectives, the pain and the dissonance, which is embedded within the lyrics and brought to life in the music. Notice that I haven't talked at all about the specific chord choices or their particular harmonic functions traveling one to the other. Are these important? Yes, of course. But are they the key element that makes this song great? I don't think so. Sure, they contribute, of course. Everything does. But there are plenty of pieces of music with great chord progressions, even in the Beatles' output. And we say, nice song, but it doesn't just grip us like this song does. I think these other musical elements that I mentioned here are more outstanding and contribute more to the unique and special characteristics of this song, which make it so great, that make it stand out from the crowd, even to the point of being unique among the Beatles' own catalog. What other song starts with this rippling harp opening? What other song among the Beatles' many songs where they have voices singing different things at different times, what other song takes two different viewpoints, two different perspectives in such a life-altering moment, event in a life, and forces us to process both of those at the same time and feel the emotional impact of each and the struggle to accept the truth of both simultaneously.
Well, maybe there are surprises waiting for you in the future.
That's very possible. I haven't heard all the Beatles songs yet. I'm in the middle of that project. But this is one that I know well. I have grown to love and have great admiration for it. So thanks to Rick for his wonderful video. I also want to thank again, in general, I want to thank Rick for his great work, the wonderful interviews he shares on his channel, all the educational and interesting musical content he puts out. And especially thank you for this delightful opportunity to engage in such a fun conversation. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this song and the key elements that make this song stand out for you, the audience, whomever it is who is watching this video. I'll be watching in the comments, and I'll be very interested to hear your perspectives. I'll see you next time.